Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has a whirlwind round of talks today with leaders in Southeast Asia. He's taking part in the ASEAN summit in Indonesia, and this morning he marked a boost for Canada's trade relations in the region as a new strategic partner of ASEAN.
In the nearer term, Canada looks forward to concluding a Canada-ASEAN free trade agreement. In the longer term, Canada would very much like to join ASEAN-led mechanisms such as the East Asia Summit and the ASEAN Defence Ministers Meeting Plus.
Trade is a key concern for Trudeau at this summit. You saw Canada's Trade Minister Mary Ng to the right of Trudeau in that address. She'll join him today for meetings with the leaders of the Philippines, South Korea, Vietnam, and Australia. Climate change is another major theme at the summit, and Canada has just pledged new money to help Indonesia deal with extreme weather events. Evan Dyer is traveling with the Prime Minister and has those details today.
I'm here in the Kebayoran Lama market in Jakarta, which is a city which, with its suburbs and exurbs, has a population of over 30 million people and is to some extent a poster child for some of the environmental problems that are being experienced here in Southeast Asia. In the case of Jakarta, the main problem is that it's sinking. That's partly a problem to do with the tunneling under the city, the groundwater extraction over the city, the fact that much of the city is below sea level and always has been. But it's also being exacerbated significantly by climate change, which means that when there are storms and there is flooding, it's that much worse than it used to be. And it's reached a point where the government of Indonesia has decided, in fact, to relocate its capital city away from Jakarta and move it to Kalimantan, which is the Indonesian part of the island of Borneo. Obviously, at these summits, those issues, climate change and other environmental issues, are a major topic. And one of the dynamics that we're seeing is that developed countries like Canada are being pressured by developing countries like Indonesia to actually fulfill commitments that they've already made to help countries like Indonesia defray some of the costs that they're experiencing, partly because of climate change. The developed countries promised to pay $500 billion over 5 years, or $100 billion a year to developing countries to help them to meet some of those costs. First of all, to cut their own emissions, but also to mitigate some of the effects that they're already experiencing. The logic behind that is because historically, of course, the developing countries contributed much less carbon to the environment than the developed countries did when they were growing their economies. Obviously, if you look at the traffic here, you can see that emissions here are now an issue as well, but historically, not so much as the developed West. So far, very little of that money has actually been delivered, but we did see something of a down payment by Canada on that commitment yesterday, albeit in the form of loans, repayable loans to Indonesia rather than grants, some of which, $40 million, was to help deal with that groundwater issue here in the Jakarta area. But that pressure on the West to actually step up with the dollars that it has promised but not yet delivered is only going to increase as the Prime Minister's tour of Asia continues and he heads on to New Delhi, where the G20 is being hosted by India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi, who's made the environment one of his signature issues of his G20 presidency, and who has said that he will try to be the voice of the global South and try to press developed countries like Canada to step up with the dollars that they promised in the past. Evan Dyer, CBC News, Jakarta.